My friends, we gather today not to learn something new, but to remember what has always been true. For centuries, mankind has lived under a gentle but persistent illusion, an illusion that has shaped our prayers, our fears, and our deepest desires. We have believed that God is with us. We have believed that somewhere, somehow, just beyond the reach of our fingertips, there is a presence moving toward us, guiding us, helping us, if only we can attract it, if only we can please it, if only we can call it into our circumstances. But let us pause and look within for a moment. When you say, God is with me, who is the me that God must come to? Who is this separate being standing outside the divine embrace? The moment you say, God is with me, you have already accepted a duality that does not exist in spiritual reality. You have placed God on one side and yourself on the other, and you have begun the long, weary journey of trying to unite what was never separate. This, my friends, has been the central misunderstanding of the spiritual life. We have imagined a God who travels, a presence that comes and goes, a love that responds to our cries only when we have prayed hard enough or lived well enough. And because we believe this, we live in fear, we live in self-doubt, we live in a constant state of trying to get what is already ours. Let us begin right here, at the opening of this work together, with a truth that can dissolve a lifetime of seeking. God is not merely with you, God is being you. The very life that beats your heart, the intelligence that animates your mind, the love that longs to express through you, that is the presence you have been calling God. It has never been outside you. It has never been distant. It has never been separate. You see, the spiritual journey is not the attempt to bring God closer. It is the quiet recognition that God could never be absent. The kingdom you have searched for in the heavens, in the scriptures, in the rituals of religion, is the kingdom that Jesus said is within you, not as a poetic idea, not as a hopeful metaphor, but as the literal truth of your being. And so, as we begin today, let us set aside the old belief that God must come to us, or that we must reach out to God. Let us rest in a deeper reality. The presence you seek is the very consciousness by which you are aware in this moment. It does not move toward you. It expresses as you. We are not here to invite God into our lives. We are here to awaken to the life that has never been anything but God. Let us go deeper now. If we are to understand the nature of this presence that lives us, we must return to the simplest of all spiritual statements, a teaching so clear that only the human mind could have complicated it. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was not offering poetry. He was not speaking symbolically. He was revealing the central fact of spiritual life, that the fullness of God, the wholeness of God, the infinitude of God, is not a distant realm to be reached after death or earned through righteousness. It is the very essence of your being in this moment. The kingdom is not something you travel toward. It is not something you acquire. It is not something that descends upon you when your prayers are perfect enough. The kingdom is the divine consciousness expressing as the life you call I. And because this kingdom is within you, every attempt to seek God outside yourself must fail. You cannot find what you already are. You cannot import the presence that is already shining at the core of your being. This is why so many seekers wander endlessly. They read more books, attend more meetings, recite more prayers, all in the hope that God will draw near. Yet Jesus says, look within. Look where you have never thought to look. Look beneath the thoughts, beneath the emotions, beneath the sense of a personal, separate self, and there you will find the kingdom that has never left you. You see, the world has reversed the teaching of the Master. We have made the kingdom a future reward, a distant heaven, a spiritual landscape somewhere beyond the clouds. But the Master placed it exactly where it had always been within you. And when he said, "The Father and I are one," he was not describing a relationship unique to himself. He was revealing the universal truth of being. The divine nature is the root of every life. This kingdom is not something you enter. It is something you awaken to. It is not something God establishes later. It is what God has established now. Your task is not to climb toward it. Your task is to remove the veil of separation in your own consciousness. And what is that veil? It is the belief that you are a human being trying to reach a divine presence. It is the belief that God is somewhere else. The moment this belief is released, even for a single breath, you begin to sense the stillness, the peace, the completeness of a presence that has never been absent. The kingdom within does not shout. It does not force itself into your awareness. It is a gentle unfolding, a quiet recognition that the life you have called me is, in truth, the life of God, expressing in individual form. When you truly understand this, you will stop searching outside. You will stop begging for what is already within, and you will begin to live from the consciousness that Jesus intended, not as a seeker of God, but as an expression of God. As we move forward, let us look more deeply at this great transition. Every sincere seeker must eventually make the shift from duality to oneness. It is not an intellectual shift. It is not the acceptance of a doctrine. It is a profound change in consciousness, a spiritual awakening in which you see clearly that there is not God and you, there is only God appearing as you. Duality is the oldest illusion known to mankind. It is the belief that there are two powers, two beings, two existences, one divine, one human, one perfect, one flawed, one infinite, one limited, and all suffering. Every conflict, every fear in your life arises from this belief in two-ness. The moment you think you stand apart from the presence, you begin to doubt, to struggle, to defend, to seek. You begin to live as a creature separate from its source. But this separation exists nowhere except in human belief. It has no spiritual reality. It has no divine sanction. It is no more real than a shadow mistaken for substance. And the instant this veil begins to lift, the instant you recognize that the life you are living is not a personal life but a divine expression, the entire structure of fear collapses. Let me say this plainly so that you do not miss it. God is not accompanying your life. God is the life you are living. You are not a mortal being borrowing breath from infinity. You are not a fragile personality hoping for divine support. The very breath you breathe is the movement of God. The very intelligence that thinks is an activity of the divine mind, the love you feel, the intuition that guides you, the compassion that arises in you, these are not human virtues. They are the nature of God expressing as individual consciousness. When you look at a wave in the ocean, you do not say, "Here is the wave, and somewhere else is the ocean." No, the wave is the ocean in expression. Its form may rise and fall, its shape may shift, but its essence is the same infinite substance. And so it is with you. The form you call my life, my personality, my story, is simply the divine life taking individual expression. Your essence has never been separate from its source. The human sense of self, the one who fears, who doubts, who seeks approval, who struggles, is not the real you. It is a temporary mask formed by the belief that you are a separated being. And as long as you live as that mask, you will experience the limitations of that belief. But the moment you begin to identify not with the mask, but with the life behind it, every limitation begins to dissolve. This shift from duality to oneness is not achieved through effort. You cannot force it. You cannot will it. You cannot study your way into it. It comes through recognition. It comes through the quiet inner knowing that what you have called I all your life is in truth God appearing as you. And when this recognition dawns even faintly, you will discover that fear has no foundation. You will discover that lack has no cause. You will discover that illness cannot touch the truth of your being. For all of these belong to the belief in separation. And once oneness is glimpsed, the power of separation begins to fade, my friends. This is the turning point of the spiritual path. Everything you have sought outside yourself begins to reveal itself within. Everything you feared begins to lose its voice, and everything you hoped God would do for you begins to unfold naturally as the activity of the divine presence that is your life. You do not become one with God. You awaken to the truth that you have never been anything else. Let us continue, and let us approach a point that may seem subtle, but upon which the entire spiritual life rests. For many sincere seekers, the phrase, God is with me, has been a source of comfort. It has carried them through hardship. It has soothed their anxieties and strengthened their hope. But I must tell you gently, yet truthfully, that this statement is still rooted in the very belief that keeps you from realizing the fullness of your spiritual identity. To say God is with me is to affirm a presence that moves in and out of your experience. It assumes a proximity that can grow stronger or weaker depending on your behavior. It suggests a God who responds to your prayers, who comes when you call, who arrives when you are worthy and stays away when you are not. And though this idea may feel comforting to the human mind, it is also the source of fear, guilt, and insecurity. As long as you believe God must come to you, you will fear the moments when you cannot feel God. You will interpret every difficulty as distance from the divine. You will judge yourself by your emotions, your moods, your circumstances, believing that God is nearer when life is easy and farther when life is hard, and when prayer seems unanswered, you will assume failure, not in the prayer, but in yourself. This is the tragedy of God is with me consciousness. It still assumes too. It still imagines a universe where God must travel, must approach, must respond, but God is not a visitor. God is not a presence that steps in and out of your life like a shifting shadow. God does not arrive. God does not depart. God does not draw near. God does not withdraw. These movements exist only in human belief, never in spiritual reality. The divine presence is not with you. It is you. It is the life you call I. It is the mind by which you think, the love by which you feel, the being by which you exist. And when you settle into this truth, even for a moment, fear begins to vanish. For how can you fear losing what you cannot be separate from? How can you worry about God's absence when God is the very essence of your being? How can you plead for help from a presence that is the inner light of your own consciousness? You see, the danger in the phrase, God is with me, is not that it is false, it is incomplete. It is the first step of awakening, but it cannot be your home. If you linger there, you will forever walk the path of the beggar, the seeker. The one who hopes God will hear, will come, will act. But the moment you awaken to oneness, you discover that God is not your helper, God is your identity. This does not make you God, for the ego cannot contain the infinite, but it reveals that the infinite is expressing itself as you, through you, in you, and as the very substance of your being. Once this dawns, the whole structure of petitionary prayer collapses. There is no longer a God to convince, no longer a presence to summon, no longer a blessing to chase. There is only recognition of what already is. To mature spiritually is to move from seeking God's nearness to realizing God's nature. It is to exchange the insecurity of duality for the peace of oneness. And this shift transforms everything because it removes the central illusion that has kept you living as a separate creature trying to reach the divine. My friends, if you hear nothing else today, hear this. You cannot lose God. You cannot lack God. You cannot be distant from God, because God is not something added to your life. God is the life itself. The day you stop asking for God's presence is the day you begin to experience it. Now we come to a central pillar of the spiritual life, one that must be understood. If you are to live in freedom rather than fear, for centuries, prayer has been built upon the assumption of lack. God, please give me this. God, please heal me. God, please fix my circumstances. And the more intensely we desire, the more passionately we plead, the more exhausted we become, because all supplication begins with a silent confession, I do not have what I need. But the spiritual life, the life that Jesus revealed, the life that the mystics have lived, the life the infinite way invites you into, is not founded on lack. It is not founded on asking. It is founded on recognition. Recognition is the quiet realization that everything you have asked God to give you has already been given. Recognition is the understanding that you cannot seek the presence, because the presence is the very ground of your being. Recognition does not beg, it acknowledges. Recognition does not reach, it rests. Recognition does not attempt to change God, it allows God to reveal the truth already present. You see, all supplicating prayer assumes a God outside yourself who must be persuaded, but recognition knows that God is the very life you are living, and that nothing needs to be added to that life. What is needed is not divine intervention, but spiritual awareness. This is why Jesus said, "Your Father knows what you need before you ask." How could this be true unless the divine presence already fills every space of your consciousness? And if that presence is already complete, already perfect, already fully expressing its wholeness, then what prayer could you possibly offer that would improve upon what God already is? And so the prayer of recognition is simple. It begins with stillness. It begins with the willingness to stop trying to achieve what is already true. It begins with a pause, a breath, a moment of surrender in which the mind ceases its frantic activity and yields to the deeper knowing within. In that moment, you do not say, "God, please be here." You rest in the awareness. God is the very presence of this moment. You do not say, "God, please heal me." You rest in the awareness. The life functioning in me is already whole. You do not say, "God, please guide me." You rest in the awareness. Divine intelligence is the mind by which I think. Recognition is not a technique. It is not a ritual. It is the natural state of consciousness. Once separation has dissolved, and every time you return to recognition, even for a few seconds, you are stepping into the kingdom. You are dropping the illusion that you stand outside your own source. Understand this. Supplication reinforces the belief in a limited, needy self. Recognition reveals the truth of the self that has never needed anything because it has never been separate from its own infinite supply. Let me offer a simple way to begin. Several times during the day, stop for just a few breaths and allow this inner truth to arise. The presence I seek is the presence I already am. You need not say it loudly. You need not say it perfectly. You need not feel anything at all. Simply acknowledge. Simply recognize. Simply rest. And you will find that as recognition becomes your way of life, fear begins to lose its authority. Anxiety loses its grip. Confusion softens, and the subtle but unmistakable guidance of the divine presence begins to reveal itself in your thoughts, your actions, and the unfolding of your day. My friends, you have spent many years asking. Now begin to discover the joy of recognizing. Let us now consider what happens practically, tangibly, unmistakably when the consciousness of God shifts from being something outside you to the recognition of God as your very life. For this is not theory, this is not philosophy, this is not the memorizing of spiritual ideas. The moment you stop living as a separate creature and begin to rest in the truth of divine identity, everything in your life begins to take on a different tone, a different rhythm, a different quality of unfolding. The first transformation you will notice is this: fear begins to dissolve. Fear can survive only where separation is believed. Fear requires a me who must face life alone, who must protect, defend, and control. But when you recognize that the life-living you is the same infinite presence that has formed galaxies and guides the stars, fear loses its foundation. You discover that you are not navigating life by yourself. Life is guiding you from within. The second transformation is clarity. Where once decisions were made through analysis, through worry, through trying to calculate outcomes, now decisions arise from a calm, inner knowing. You begin to live intuitively, not impulsively, but from the quiet assurance that the divine intelligence that formed your being continues to govern your experience. Ideas come when they are needed. Guidance appears without strain. You do not reach for answers, they reveal themselves. The third transformation is peace, even when nothing has changed externally. The moment you recognize God as the life you are living, you cease trying to fix the world around you. You cease believing that your peace depends upon circumstances. You discover that peace is the nature of the divine presence itself, and that presence is the ground of your being. This inner stillness becomes your home, your refuge, your atmosphere, even when the world storms around you. The fourth transformation is found in relationships. When you no longer see yourself as a separate human personality, you stop demanding, expecting, or fearing the behavior of others. You realize that everyone around you is also the expression of God, though many do not yet know it, and this recognition softens your gaze. You begin to behold the divine behind the human mask. Conflict loses its bite. Judgment loses its power. Compassion rises naturally, not as an emotional effort, but as the very nature of the presence expressing itself as you. The fifth transformation is supply. when you no longer see yourself as a limited human being trying to acquire good, but as the expression of the infinite source itself, lack loses its meaning. You stop living from desperation and begin living from completeness. This does not mean money falls from the sky. It means that the consciousness of wholeness draws into your experience the forms that match it: opportunities, ideas, relationships, provision. The law of consciousness is simple. What you recognize within becomes the pattern of life without. Let me offer a gentle story, not as proof, but as illustration. A woman who spent years praying desperately for financial help finally encountered the teaching of inner recognition. Instead of begging God for supply, she began each day resting in the awareness: the source of all life flows as my life now. She did this without expectation, without trying to influence events. Weeks passed. The fear of lack began to quiet. Her decisions became clearer. She stopped chasing solutions and began acting from peace. And gradually, almost without noticing when it happened, her outer circumstances shifted. A new opportunity came. A long-delayed project opened. What had seemed impossible became natural. Nothing magical occurred. Consciousness changed, and experience followed, as it always must. The sixth transformation is healing. Where once the body was feared as fragile, vulnerable, and separate from spirit, you now see it as an instrument through which the divine presence expresses. This does not deny physical conditions. It simply refuses to build identity around them. You begin to understand that the body responds to consciousness, and as fear dissolves, as separation dissolves, as inner peace becomes natural, the body often reflects that harmony, sometimes quickly, sometimes gradually, but always in accordance with the changes taking place within. And finally, the deepest transformation is freedom. When you know that God is the life living you, the entire burden of existence lifts. You no longer wrestle with life. You no longer battle circumstances. You no longer attempt to force spiritual growth. You rest, you allow, you listen, and you discover that the same presence that animates your life is unfolding your path with a wisdom far greater than human effort could achieve. My friends, life does not transform because God intervenes. Life transforms because your consciousness awakens. Now, let us turn to the heart of spiritual practice, not the outer rituals, not the spoken prayers, not the mental affirmations, but the interior stillness where the presence reveals itself. For if the kingdom of God is within you, then you must learn how to enter that inner sanctuary, not through effort, not through imagination, but through the simple grace of becoming still. The great mistake of spiritual practice is the belief that it must be active. You have been taught to speak to God, to call upon God, to plead with God, to chant, to visualize, to fill the mind with holy thoughts. But the mind that tries to reach God is the very thing that obscures God, and the noise of human thinking is the veil that hides the silence in which the divine presence is known. Therefore, the highest spiritual practice is not doing, it is undoing. It is the quiet release of mental effort. It is the cessation of trying. It is the surrender of the belief that you must achieve something, feel something, or create spiritual experience. True meditation is not an act of reaching for God. It is the stillness in which you discover that God has already been here all along. Let me say this plainly. The presence is not found through words. The presence is not found through thought. The presence is found in the absence of both. When you sit quietly, not to get something, not to change something, not to force a feeling, but simply to be, you begin to feel a subtle shift. The mind softens, the body relaxes, the breath finds its natural rhythm, and in that stillness, you become aware of a quiet, living presence at the core of your being. It is not felt through sensation. It is not heard through sound. It is known through a deep, wordless awareness. This is the secret of meditation as taught to those who truly sought illumination. Be still and let God reveal God. And you do not need an hour. You do not need a sacred space. You do not need a perfect mind. You need only the willingness to stop just for a moment and to rest in the truth that the life within you is divine. Let me guide you into a simple practice, not as a technique, but as a doorway. Wherever you are, perhaps as you listen now, allow yourself to pause. No effort, no striving, no attempt to reach out. Simply let the next breath be natural. And now, in this quietness, recognize not with the mind, not with words, but with inner awareness. God is the very presence of this moment. Do not try to feel God. Do not try to experience something mystical. Simply recognize and rest. This is the beginning of silent union. This is the entrance into the kingdom. And when practiced consistently, 3 seconds here, 5 seconds there, a minute, during moments of stillness, this inner silence begins to weave itself into your entire day. It becomes your atmosphere. It becomes the ground upon which your thoughts and actions unfold. You will discover that the less you try, the more you become aware of the divine presence. The quieter you become, the more guidance arises, the more deeply you rest, the more easily life flows. For silence is not empty. Silence is filled with the divine activity that human effort cannot produce. Let me share something essential. You do not meditate to bring God into your life. You meditate to become aware of the God who has never left. This practice of silent union is not escape from the world. It is entry into reality. It does not remove you from your responsibilities. It empowers you to meet them with clarity and peace. It is not something you do in addition to life. It becomes the very foundation of life. And as you return to this silence throughout your day between tasks, in moments of uncertainty, before speaking, before acting, you will find that solutions arise without effort. Opportunities appear without strain, and peace remains even amid challenges. Why? Because you are no longer living from a human sense of self, you are living from the presence within. This is the true meditation. This is the doorway to the kingdom. This is the practice that dissolves the illusion of separation and reveals the oneness that has always been the truth of your being. Now that we have entered the silence together, let us speak of what comes next, not merely the recognition of God within, but the living of that truth in daily experience. For spiritual awareness is not confined to the quiet moments. It is meant to be carried into every action, every conversation, every circumstance of life. The purpose of realization is not to retreat from the world, but to illuminate it from within. The question is not, how do I act more spiritual? The question is, how do I allow the divine presence to express itself as my life? This is the essence of oneness, not that you adorn yourself with spiritual words or practices, but that you stop living as a separate self and begin to yield to the deeper life that seeks to express through you. You do not become divine. You permit the divine nature already within to shine unobstructed. When you live as the expression of God, something beautiful happens. Your actions lose their strain, your efforts lose their desperation, your decisions lose their confusion, for you are no longer acting from personal will, you are flowing from the inner presence. Consider this: the branch does not struggle to bear fruit, it does not demand strength, nor plead for nourishment, nor worry about the seasons. It simply abides in the vine, and the life of the vine expresses as the fruit. So too, when you abide in the inner presence, when you recognize yourself as the expression of the divine, your life begins to bear its natural fruit without effort. Let us explore how this unfolds in daily living. In your work, you stop asking, "What should I do?" and begin listening inwardly. What would love express here? What would intelligence reveal here? What is the next effortless step? Actions arise without anxiety because they do not come from the limited human mind. In your relationships, you cease projecting your fears, expectations, and insecurities onto others. Instead, you behold the truth that each person before you is also a vessel of the same divine presence. Even when their behavior seems unkind or confused, you recognize that the Christ within them remains untouched. This recognition shifts interactions in ways that force can never achieve. In moments of challenge, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin resting in the truth. This circumstance cannot alter my spiritual identity. God is the life I am. Nothing can oppose the nature of God expressing itself. And from this awareness, wisdom unfolds, solutions appear, strength arises. In moments of success, you no longer cling to achievements as personal accomplishments, nor fear their loss. You understand that success is simply one form through which the divine presence has chosen to express temporarily. You do not grasp it. You do not exalt in it. You receive it with gratitude and release it with grace. In moments of failure, you do not collapse into guilt or self-condemnation. You recognize that failure belongs only to the human sense of self, not to the divine identity. And so, failure does not define you. It becomes a passing appearance that cannot touch the truth of your being. Living as the expression of God is not a lofty ideal. It is the simplest way of life. It means you cease trying to be something holy, wise, good, successful, and instead recognize that everything God is already seeks expression through you. You do not have to force compassion. Compassion flows naturally when you stop defending yourself. You do not have to force patience. Patience appears when you rest in inner peace. You do not have to force love. Love expresses itself when you recognize your unity with all life. This is why Jesus said, "Let your light shine." Not create your light, not polish it, not defend it. Simply let it shine. The light is already within. The life is already within. The wisdom is already within. The kingdom is already within. Your task is not to make these things happen. Your task is to remove the false identity that has hidden them. And so, spiritual living becomes effortless, not passive, but surrendered, not inactive, but receptive, not self-centered, but God-centered. When you truly recognize your oneness with the divine, you discover that life is not something you must manage. Life is something you must allow. And now, as we bring this period of inner contemplation to a close, Let us return to the very first truth with which we began, because all spiritual realization, no matter how deep, always circles back to the same simplicity. God is not merely with you, God is being you. Everything we have explored today, oneness, silent union, inner guidance, effortless living, flows from this one foundational realization. You have not been walking toward God. You have not been growing closer to God. You have not been trying to reach a presence outside yourself. You have been awakening to the presence that has never been absent. Let your heart rest in this. There is no separation to overcome. There is no distance to bridge. There is no journey to complete. The divine life is the very essence of your being. The kingdom is not reached by effort. It is revealed by recognition. And recognition is not a dramatic revelation. It is not an emotional experience. It is not a spiritual fireworks display. It is a quiet, gentle knowing that arises in the stillness of your own consciousness. I and the Father are one, not two, not near, one. Whenever fear arises, you return to recognition. Whenever anxiety stirs, you return to recognition. Whenever the mind insists on separation, you return to recognition. Not through force, not through effort, not through repeated words, but through the quiet awareness that the life you are living is divine in origin, divine in nature, and divine in expression. Let this be your practice going forward. Before each activity, pause for just a moment, not to ask God to come, not to seek help from a distant heaven, but to acknowledge God is the presence of this moment. When facing a challenge, pause and recognize, my life is not separate from the infinite. When feeling uncertain, pause and know, the mind by which I think is God in expression. When feeling unworthy, pause and remember, nothing I have done, nothing I have feared, nothing I have believed has ever changed my spiritual identity. And when you forget, as all of us do, simply return again. There is no condemnation in forgetting. There is no failure in drifting. There is no judgment for falling back into human patterns. The spiritual life is not a path of perfection. It is a path of awakening. Each time you remember, the veil thins. Each time you recognize, the light grows stronger. Each time you rest in the presence, the illusion of separation weakens, and eventually, gradually, naturally, the truth becomes your home. Your atmosphere, your way of living. You no longer try to remember God. You no longer struggle to find God. You simply know. And from that knowing, everything in your life begins to unfold with the effortless grace of the divine presence expressing itself through you. So let us end where all true spirituality begins, with quiet recognition. Wherever you are, in this very moment, simply rest in this truth. The kingdom of God is within me now. The presence of God is the life I am, and always have been, one with the infinite. My friends, may this recognition accompany you gently into the next breath, the next step, the next conversation, and the next unfolding of your life, not as a technique, not as a belief, but as the living truth of your being.